right, so I'm going to just reach behind me and I'm going to grab some fish, some highlights from the Kafue River. So I've pulled out a few fish here. This is an African pike, a Hepsatus. This is one of the big predators in the Kafue River system. It's also found in the Zambezi. But in the Kafue, this is the top fish predator. And they've got really big teeth, a little hard to see, but they are just beautiful fish, very cool. This fish will have its own jar here in the museum. So that's a fun one. Let me show off a couple of catfishes. So I really like catfish. This is very likely an undescribed species of catfish we collected last year, very close to the Kafue source. You can see how elongate and thin this catfish is. It is a clariday, very interesting fish. Nothing really like it known from the Kafue or Zambezi system. So that's exciting. And a relatively big one. I'm going to show you a relatively small catfish here now. So that is an adult Cheiloglanus catfish. So this is a tiny little catfish that lives in the rapids, and it's got a little sucker on its mouth, and so it can suck onto the rocks when the fast-flowing water is going over its body. And I imagine that there's a lot of undescribed diversity in the rapids-adapted catfish from the Zambezi. So very exciting to catch these specimens, and looking forward to finding some more as we get back into the field. Now I'm going to grab some minnows here, and I think this is a really good example of the importance of a collection like this at the American Museum. So I have 7 minnows here, and they may all look quite similar. Let me just start pulling them up. You know, this one's got a little line and a little spot on the tail. This one's got beautiful little striping pattern and a little post-humeral spot there. But, you know, they all look pretty similar, don't they? You know, they're all minnows, right? But when I look at these fish side by side, I actually can really start to distinguish some differences. You know, this fish is a little bit more elongate. This one's got kind of a hump in its back here, different shape on the fin. And so having fish side by side like this, having specimen that I can compare, that I can use a microscope to really look at what the differences are in these fish, allows me to distinguish species and allows me to identify which ones in this collection may actually be new to science. So excitingly, this little minnow, while it doesn't look like much, is actually an undescribed species as well. We know it, but no one has formally described it. So right now we just call it Enteromius purple stripe. It is a very beautiful fish while it's alive. When it's preserved, it looks just a lot like the other minnows. So I'm going to put these minnows away, but there's a lot of cool fish around the collection here. So right next to me, I've got a few other jars. So let me just sneak somebody else's fish out here. So this is a deep water fish here, and it was collected in Angola in 1927, if you can believe it. So these fish collections all around the world serve kind of as the library of life. So folks like me, ichthyologists, we go out and we make our collections. The collections come to a repository like this, they get curated, and then they get put into the collection. And going into these collections, it feels like a library, but instead of books, you have jars of fish. And so each of these jars has fish from a certain location, a certain species, a certain collecting event. And you can then say, okay, I'm really curious to look at the catfishes. I want to compare my catfish to the other catfish of the world. So I can come to a museum like this, I can pull out all the catfish and I can lay them out side by side so I can compare them and I can study the diversity. It's a really important step in describing new species and also documenting the diversity of life in the first place. And one of the things that's also really cool about a collection like this is because we have specimen from 100 years ago, we can compare both present day to past. So we can look in the past what was different from today. So one of the studies that's going on in this lab right now is looking at microplastics and the differences between fishes collected in the 1970s and in the present day. So really exciting stuff. There's just 2 more jars of fish that I want to pull over because they're just so cool. So bear with me. Now, these are also not fish that I collected, but they are really cool and they've been prepared in a special way. You might be able to see they're kind of reddish. And if you get a good look, these are all seahorses. And they have been prepared in a way that's called cleared and staining. So you process the fish to make them semi-transparent, and you can dye the bones and the connective tissue different colors, and it allows you to study the morphology of these fishes without dissecting them to a large degree. So these are really beautiful, cool specimen. These are from the Philippines, interestingly enough, and were collected in 1980. And one last jar, this is another cleared and stained specimen, but it shows a little bit of the other coloration. All right. So this is a sturgeon, and you can see that it has been cleared and stained blue, and it's a beautiful little specimen. Where is this from? This is collected in Turkmenistan. So that's the beauty of these collections. We've got fish from Angola, the Philippines, Turkmenistan, the US, of course, Zambia, Congo. And so these collections, like at the American Museum of Natural History, allow us to see all the diversity of life in one location and really dive into the taxonomy and the diversity. And it's really a cool thing. And I feel very lucky to be able to contribute the specimen that we've collected over the last few years into this collection at the American Museum. And we've got another 4,500 fish en route coming in from Angola. So very exciting stuff. I can't wait to figure out how many new species we have in these collections and then to get those new species described. So